Tonight, CNN is taking you to the far corners of the Earth for a special report on the climate crisis. CNN's Bill Weir traveled with a team of researchers tracking whales across the seas to reveal how the crisis is affecting them. Here's a preview.
For generations, the only way to study whales was to cut up a dead one. But then non-lethal research took hold. And while this may look medieval, one of the biggest breakthroughs is the crossbow biopsy, developed by Ari's team at UC Santa Cruz to measure everything from stress levels and toxins to, most importantly, pregnancy rates.
Beautiful. Perfect classic sample. That's the blubber layer. The skin will be sort of still back up inside this little tip here. We'll put it into that case and keep it sterile until we get back to the boat to process it.
Yeah. You were telling me that the pregnancy rate is a huge indicator, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what else tells you about a population that's growing or shrinking is how many newborns you're putting into the population each year. So we'll tell if that was a female, if it is a female, if she's pregnant or not.
It's the first time I've ever seen somebody take a pregnancy test with a crossbow.
Yeah, I don't think you get many of those.
With me now is CNN Chief Climate Correspondent Bill Weir. So, Bill, I got to start one. I'm jealous. I've never actually seen a whale in person, and here we go. You've seen clearly many. So, just tell us a little bit about meeting these whales. What were your impressions?
Well, Omar, first of all, I'm going to take you whale watching, and we don't even really have to ring up the expense account. We can go to Red Hook, New Jersey, and watch them go by here. They're everywhere. Humpbacks are the greatest comeback story in conservation. They were nearly harpooned into oblivion when I was a little boy, but the Save the Whales movement saved the whales. And they're incredible sort of indicator species. They're the most adaptable. That is a minke whale, the little guys there. But the big humpbacks that are everywhere, not only do they provide incredible amount of Earth services, science is just realizing that a single whale over the course of its life is worth $2 million, both in drawing down carbon and then seeding the oceans. Their poo creates the bottom of the food chain. It's the phytoplankton creates, which then feeds the krill, which feeds everything else. So there's more food wherever there are whales. And the comeback is great, but now there are all these new threats. The sea ice is going away, so their food supply is going away. There's shipping traffic. There's krill fisheries. So many stresses, but making this hour was such a joy. I'm so blessed, and it blew my mind on a dozen different levels, learning about these fantastic planetary roommates we have.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to watch. From what I've seen, it already looks incredible. Bill Weir, I'm going to take you up on that whale watching. See ya.
You got it. Let's do it.
All right, and for everyone else, don't go anywhere. A new episode of The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper. What Whales Tell Us is next right here on CNN. Thanks for joining me this evening. I'm Omar Jimenez. It was a pleasure. I think we had a good time here. The Whole Story is next, followed by new episodes of The Many Lives of Martha Stewart. Have a good night.
Go forward here.
Because of that discovery, scientists and conservationists...
Well, it just went right to it, didn't it? Sorry about that. Let me back up a little bit. I figured it'd be a commercial.
Welcome to The Whole Story. I'm Anderson Cooper. 50 years ago, humpback whales were considered an endangered species after decades of commercial whaling decimated the population. Around that same time, scientists learned something extraordinary. Whales were communicating with each other, sometimes by song over long distances. In part because of that discovery, scientists and conservationists rallied to enact laws to protect the whales. And it worked. The humpback whale population has made a remarkable comeback. But now they face a host of new threats. Global warming is killing off their food source, and human activity is causing thousands of whale deaths a year, from the stress of underwater construction noise to fishing entanglements and ship collisions. In the next hour, CNN's Bill Weir takes us to Antarctica, a place very few people get to visit to study these remarkable creatures and show us why saving the whales may also be saving the planet, because they are one of our best partners in battling climate change.
Those are the songs of humpback whales, now flying about 15 billion miles away from Earth, on the off chance intelligent life out there wants to understand life down here. Before those songs were etched onto golden records and launched on the Voyager probes,
They actually have it just the opposite. It's us down here that need to understand the world up there. They already know what's going on down here. They predicted, forecasted that this mess that the human race was going to evolve into was already going to occur before it ever occurred. We cannot outsmart them because it was them that created us. So it's not for them to understand us, but rather it is us down here on the planet to understand them.
Voyager probes. They were recorded in 1970, the same year humans listed humpbacks as an endangered species. And the way things were going, it looked like humanity had just sent the galaxy the sound of man-made extinction. But in the last 50 years, humpbacks have made a spectacular comeback. One of the great success stories in the history of conservation. Just in time to face some of the biggest threats of all.
In just the last 2 months, 9 whales, 9, have washed up. Nearly 20 reported up and down the East Coast.
And now all species.
Now, I've had a remedy to what is causing this, though I don't have a solution to the problem, is the fact that they have ventured off into waters that was entirely not for their habitat, pertaining to it being too hot. In other words, all the volcano activity that's below the ground, pertaining to undersea volcano activity, that got kind of like the frog in the theory, you know, they got the edging into it very slowly, and their bodies adapted, and they kept edging into it a little slower, and their bodies adapted until finally they realize, oops, I'm in trouble, I need to get out of here. And then they become disoriented, and a lot of times, rather than them swimming away from the heat, they actually swim into it. And this is the results in basically committing suicide, because they know once they beach themselves, they're dead. They're dead. It's over.
These Earth's gentle giants are under enormous stress. Their water overheated by the kind of fossil fuel pollution that floats in the sky and the kind that floats in the sea. To survive, they must compete for food with a growing number of krill fishing fleets. They must dodge our relentless supply chains and hide from the last of the whale hunters, who uses harpoons tipped with grenades and sells the meat as pet food.
What do you say to people who believe that this is a special animal?
It's likely a mom and a calf and then a third animal.
But on the side of the whales are scientists, eager to venture to the ends of the earth to better understand the entwined futures of man and whale. From lush and steamy jungles to Antarctic ice, they follow the migrating humpbacks back and forth, and tonight we'll tag along. Starting at the end of the world, Ushuaia, Argentina, the tip of South America, and the most popular gateway to southern ice, where we are catching a lift on a boat called the Ocean Endeavor.
Good afternoon on board Ocean Endeavor. In 15 minutes, we're having refitting in towards the sound.
Intrepid is the Australian travel company which opened this route in 2023 for the kind of tourist who loves penguins, seals, and whales so much they'll risk 3 days of seasickness each way just to visit them.
We are getting just a little taste of why it took so long for humanity to discover Antarctica. About 40 years after they discovered the planet Uranus, the Southern Ocean.
Look at this. These are, about 20-foot seas. And this is mild, if you were an old salt who sails these waters. Katabatic winds can come rushing off the ice sheets at 150 miles an hour, creating storms and seas so lonely the closest humans might be on the International Space Station. But just as quickly, the Drake Passage can turn into the Drake Lake, which makes for a magical first impression. You know, some days are more fun to get out of bed than others. Kind of like the morning when you wake up in Antarctica. Look at this. We made it to the bottom of the world.
Ever so surreal. But then there's other times that it's more violent, that 70 plus below zero, with the wind chill being beyond that, can be some of the most aggressiveness.
I'm not a fan of the cliche, but I've decided I'm going to describe this place as Alaska on steroids.
It's like when you go to Alaska, they say there is the glacier.
Yeah.
And you come here, glaciers don't even have names because there's so many of them. You know?
There's one there,
Yeah,
there,
it's continuous.
there. It may be the wildest place I've seen on 7 continents. And it is a very happy place for Ari Friedlander, a marine ecologist with the University of California, Santa Cruz. He fell in love with this ice and these animals over 25 years ago and has been chasing whales ever since.
Did you see something?
I saw something come out of the water, but I didn't see what.
There he is, right under us. Just from under us.
Oh my God. No way. Hello. Hello, big boy. Oh my God. This is a minke, the smallest, stealthiest, and stinkiest of the baleen whales, and as a result, long the safest from whale hunters. That green stuff is a colony of algae called diatoms, and since they get scrubbed off on long migrations, it's a clue that this whale has been hanging around out here for a while, and we're likely the first humans it has ever encountered.
There you go.
I assume it accepted the foreign objects that it was looking at rather well and feeling comfortable around them and not feeling threatened.
I think he wanted me to scratch his belly.
One of the video tags we put on the minke, and it goes and it points straight up, just looking at this ice, and it sticks its nose up, and then just kind of lays down. These big chunks of ice are bouncing off the tag, and then it just sits there, and it just logs in the ice for 10 or 15 minutes, and you'd never know it was there, except for the few times it would take a breath. It was just completely still and at the same, level as this ice. We think that these bays and the sea ice offers protection because the killer whales, when they go after minkies, generally will chase them until they're exhausted and then try and kind of drown them. But they can't really chase them in this environment. Minkies can just hide out, among the icebergs. Wow. And probably get away from them.
While always nice to visit with a stinky minke, this research team is mainly focused on humpbacks, including biologist Natalia Botero Costa from Colombia, and Chris Johnson, who leads whale and dolphin conservation at the World Wildlife Fund.
We've got a special computer on the base of this, which allows us to take measurements of its width, its length, and get a good health check on the whale.
He spent over 5 years chasing sperm whales around the world with Roger and Katie Payne, who, along with Navy engineer Frank Watlington, captured the first whale song, released it to the public, and blew humanity's minds.
It had a massive influence. You know, when we discovered that there was a creature in our oceans that their vocalizations were like songs to us, that broadened everyone's imagination. It really helped form the Save the Whales movement, which led to the moratorium on commercial whaling in the mid-'80s.
Without those recordings, these whales might not be here to study. And we are surrounded. Perfect time to see who's healthy, who's hungry, and who's pregnant. Tools that include medieval weaponry.
Race car truck.
I've always been fascinated by marina life, and whenever the show come out a few years ago on Star Trek, towards them actually
On the water.
capturing a whale, I was absolutely fascinated
1-8. Order now.
that Star Trek would have promoted that in one of their movies.
For 4 days, this international team of whale scientists will spend every possible moment on the water, gathering as much data as they can. With cameras on drones to measure the body size of each animal from above, and cameras with long lenses to identify individuals.
Well, that's the dorsal shot, it's not a side shot, though.
By flukes as distinctive as fingerprints.
Wow.
Sad face. Seriously, it has 2 lines and 1 arch.
Oh, yeah. It's the sad emoji whale. For generations, the only way to study whales was to cut up a dead one. But then non-lethal research took hold. And while this may look medieval, one of the biggest breakthroughs is the crossbow biopsy, developed by Ari's team at UC Santa Cruz to measure everything from stress levels and toxins to, most importantly, pregnancy rates.
Beautiful. Perfect classic sample. That's the blubber layer. The skin will be sort of still back up inside this little tip here. We'll put it into that case and keep it sterile until we get back to the
Medical research.
Yeah. You were telling me that the pregnancy rate is a huge indicator, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what else tells you about a population that's growing or shrinking is how many newborns you're putting into the population each year. So
Yeah.
we'll tell if that was a female, if it is a female, if she's pregnant or not.
And that should be that gauge with even human life and all life.
I've ever seen somebody take a pregnancy test with a crossbow.
Yeah, I don't think you get many of those.
There may have been some dads that asked for a paternity test with a crossbow and said, "You get my daughter pregnant?"
And then there is Ari's other favorite tool.
It's got acoustics. It also has video,
The underwater whale cam.
as well as GPS and VHF.
The suction cups are designed to hold for a day. A radio receiver will be used to find it. And with any luck, they'll get a whale's eye view like this to better understand how they move, feed, and socialize.
Morning. Would you like to participate in our whale research study? I'll take a non-answer as a yes. And I'm just going to put it right in front of the dorsal fin. Okay, right to the dorsal fin now.
They are so primitive. I'm going to say they're probably some of the first
Neutral.
life forms on planet that are still here.
Maybe they sense that we come in peace. But luck smiles on the team as they biopsy whale after whale, using the drone to measure how fat and healthy they look. And then they hit the jackpot. Oh, we got poo? whale stool sample.
Nice.
We got a good chat for you, Principal.
I should eat plenty.
Look at that.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That is the goal.
Joe, there we have to treat. We have to treat.
New science finds that when it comes to Earth repair, whale poo has massive value. You see, when whalers wiped out 95% of the baleen whales, we lost the planet's biggest fertilizer pumps. One pod can take important nutrients from deep water and spread them across miles of ocean surface water, feeding the phytoplankton, which feeds the krill, which feeds everything from penguins to seals to whales.
They're the gardeners of the ocean, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a great point. And instead of thinking of a food chain as going from one end to the other and stopping, it's much more like a circle. And what we've found out more recently is that when you have whales in an area, they're consuming a huge amount of food, and they're also putting back into their environment these essential nutrients that are typically limiting in the ocean. So they're literally seeding the upper parts of the ocean with the opportunity for plant life to grow, and that's what feeds the whale food. So you're right, in a sense, they're basically farmers. They're recycling nutrients. There's more food available to them the more they're around.
All
And
part of
with
the
advent of camera
ecosystem.
drones, science is just starting to appreciate that they can also be the ranchers of the sea and round up a cloud of tasty krill with a bubble lasso. It's going to start blowing bubbles out of its blowhole pretty quickly in sequence around that group of krill, and it's going to start making the tightest possible circle. You can see a pectoral flipper. It's rolled over on its right side.
It's almost like a machine with the precision of
like
the spot.
like a locomotive. And now watch as it uses its pectoral flipper to actually create the last bit of the bubble net right there.
Scooping them in.
Yeah, and then it opens and closes its mouth. Like a Mickey whale couldn't do that. A blue whale, a fin whale couldn't do that. These animals are supremely adapted to be able to create foraging opportunities that are more efficient for themselves.
To me, this is just as impressive and groundbreaking as realizing chimpanzees use tools.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is tool use. When you add up the services they provide by restoring fisheries,
I personally believe that they create a wall of bubbles that frightens the whatever that was that they was talking about there, those little bitty fish. It frightens them to the degree that they're not willing to go through it because they're afraid if they do, they don't know what's on the other side. So they basically freeze. Whenever they freeze, then they become very vulnerable towards the whale coming in there and basically yum, 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 yum.
helping plankton pull carbon out of the sky and locking tons of carbon at the bottom of the ocean when they die. Recent science puts the value of a single adult whale at around $2 million. Turns out that by saving the whales, we're saving ourselves. But there are so many threats to overcome.
So many threats that basically are all formatted by humans. Humanitarian problems. Changing the ecosystems all over the world and in the world and above the world.
To buy medicine. On the ground, I bring you the most important stories of our time. Now, I share them with you here.
Absolutely. Thank God for scientists. Thank God for people that's willing to go beyond the call of duty and doing what they do.
Straight to the fact.
Here we go.
Again, everyone. When in Antarctica, do as the whales do, right? That's right, go applause.
To be honest, I wasn't sure what kind of tourist I'd meet on a South Pole cruise with whale scientists.
I did it!
You did it!
Turns out, this guy.
Come on down.
Medical research has found out that this is more than just a fad or some sort of a psychological trend that people want to do. It's actually good for the body to go through that type of shock, and it helps the long longevity of a person that can go through different settings of their lives towards being able to transfigurate to whatever environment that they're being exposed to. In other words, their survivalist rate changes once you do that, and some people actually do it routinely in just jumping off into a bathtub of ice. I personally believe that it opens up door phones in your body and your brain. That's primarily just for protecting the body, and it releases a certain chemical in that body from your brain that ordinarily you would never ever be exposed to unless your body went through some sort of dramatic change like that. And I'm sure it probably does the same thing in people that's set on fire versus people that jumps off into a cold body of water.
It's much worse than you think. Steve and Carrie were moved to take a very different kind of polar plunge.
Steve, you are a real gentleman, and I love that you always put me first.
Vowing to stay together in seasickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
But on the ocean endeavor, nature is the main event. And the Antarctic Peninsula now draws over 100,000 nature lovers a year.
Wow.
More people go through JFK Airport in a single day, but all it takes is one invasive virus to upset this pristine ecosystem. So we must disinfect every boot and bag before every excursion. We finally get a chance.
And that's just playing it safe towards making sure that you're not going to contaminate something that don't deserve to be contaminated. It was the same thing of what we used to do whenever the Apollos would come back to the atmosphere and our astronauts would come back to the planet. They would go through a long process before we would allow for them to basically get back out into the open, because we wasn't so sure in what possibly that they was going to be exposed to. Even though they had suits and even though they was in a controlled environment, you really never know whenever it comes to germ biological warfare. You do not want to disturb something deliberately or intentionally that you cannot harness or take control over. Kind of like COVID.
Finally get a chance to go ashore and are greeted by thousands of Gen 2 penguins. How can you not love penguins? My little boy is obsessed with penguins, and I'm obsessed with penguins because they walk like my little boy. They're like toddlers on land. They're so chill and curious. We had a log jam with the passengers on the ship because one penguin was standing in the middle of the trail.
I don't know, but for some reason, you can laugh if you want to. To me, the penguins reminds me of the Egyptian song, "Walk Like a Egyptian," or "Do This" or "Do That." For some strange reason, whenever I see a penguin, it reminds me of the Egyptians. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of their shape. Maybe it's because of the knowledge that we know about the Egyptians. But it kind of reminds me of that song where they do that line dancing, that Egyptian line dancing song. Every time I see a penguin, it reminds me of that.
Ship because one penguin was standing in the middle of the trail. We got to be respectful of the locals. This is their neighborhood. We're visitors.
Absolutely.
But our delight turns to worry as we learn that these birds are building nests for chicks that have no chance of survival.
Oh.
The warming climate and enough freakish spring snow this year that it delayed nesting season for weeks. Chicks born this late won't have enough time to grow feathers and fat needed to get through winter. And of course, what connects these little guys to the seals and the whales is krill. Those little shrimp-like critters that need sea ice to both reproduce and to feed. And the problem is, sea ice is going away down here. And scientists are really concerned about what that means for the future of these ecosystems. In the first year...
I just want to say this for the record. How many times have you heard me put out videos and I talk about the animal kingdom, that how disturbing it has to be to the deer, the rabbits, the squirrel, the birds, whenever, you know, they put on their winter coat, getting ready for the common ordinary winter, but then all of a sudden it bounces up to 75, 80 degrees. It's got to be dramatic for the animal kingdom, much less the things that we are experiencing as humans.
Future of these ecosystems.
In the first year of life, these juvenile krill spend that that time in winter underneath the sea ice, and they feed on the microbial and algal communities underneath that sea ice. So the more sea ice you have, the more food you have. The less you have, the less food you have.
Right.
There is a ceiling for how much food is available for the whales. And the way that manifests is in the pregnancy rates. And so we have a very good understanding now that when you have a poor sea ice year, the following year you're going to have lower reproductive rates,
Wow.
which means that there isn't enough food, because in good ice years, the reproductive rates are very high.
And to gather as much fertility data as possible, the Colombian member of the team, Natalia Botero Acosta, lives by the creed, have crossbow, will travel, because humpbacks have the longest migration routes of any mammal. From the icy poles to the steamy tropics and back. Rinse and repeat. A whale nicknamed Frodo for his wandering ways has been spotted from Mexico to Russia to the Mariana Islands and holds the record for a one-way trip of nearly 7,000 miles. Meanwhile, most of the whales we met come up from the bottom of the world to the top of South America to mate and make whale babies along the Pacific coast. The team tells me there's decent data out of Ecuador, Panama, and Costa Rica, but armed guerrillas and drug cartels help make the Colombian coast a black hole for marine science for a long time. That is until 2009, when Natalia found a jungle village called Coquille. And then she told folks she needed a place to study the object of local fear and fascination.
Local fear and
30 years
fascination?
ago, they were terrified of whales. Like, they were really scared, and when they were fishing and they saw a whale, back to town. Right? Yeah, they were really scared.
Whale watching tourism began to shift that perception in the 90s. Then Natalia arrived and asked if she could set up a lab.
There we go.
Oh, and could she store blubber samples in the restaurant freezer? Yes. They welcomed her like family.
When I first came here, even people from my hometown had no idea this place existed. Like, why was it important? Now, less than a month ago, it was designated as a biosphere reserve by UNESCO. That has always been an aspect that, like, I think a lot of people find fascinating, especially the kids, to, like, tell them, like, they're Colombian, just like you and me. Yeah, I
They were
think...
born right over there. You can
Yeah?
see it from their house.
And in reality, they're more of the descendants towards being native than even they are.
She's seen the same whale in both places, which means she's seen the same whales act as differently as couch potatoes and spring breakers.
It's 100% different. So in Antarctica, we saw the whales, like sleeping and eating. It was very chill. Like, you can approach a whale and, like, you see them sleeping, and it's like logging, like super near to the surface, very quiet. They're very active. A bunch of males, 10, 12 males, following a female and competing for that female who's allegedly receptive.
But these days, scientists aren't just exploring whale bodies with crossbow biopsies or beach whale necropsies. They're also trying to get into their minds with hydrophones and artificial intelligence.
And that's like real time.
This is live.
Yeah. There's some units that are called bloop, or the nickname is bloop because it's like literally like bloop, bloop. We know that only males sing. And of course, like the initial hypothesis was like, well, is to attract the females, sort of like making a parallel with like birds. But then that hypothesis has very little evidence behind it. So there's this whole different set of hypotheses. It's sort of like a mechanism for males to interact with each other and maybe arrange those competitive groups. That is
or maybe they're watchmen towards wanting to warn others about dangers.
And for sort of like orienting themselves spatially, that it can promote
Spatially, like,
yeah,
I'm over here, you stay over there.
kind of, yeah, like establishing a territory, that it can promote ovulation for females. It's a whole different, and it's also something amazing because people started realizing that these whales sing back in the 70s. It's been decades of studying song,
Right.
but still a bit of a mystery for all
Still trying
of
to
us.
translate what they're saying.
Yeah.
After sending the song of the humpback whale into space, how long before we understand the lyrics?
I'm sure once we get to the afterlife, we'll know a whole lot more than we do in this life. And we're going to look back and see where humanity could have saved the planet, but didn't, which would be one of the most saddest days of history. I went too far, I'm sorry. This is fascinating to me. Oh, right there.
A blubber base, as it were.
Every sample comes back. It gets sort of labeled from the location as well as the species. So Antarctic Peninsula 2019 season.
The mascot of the University of California, Santa Cruz is a banana slug. But I argue they should change it to the fighting humpback.
We've got our biopsy crossbow armory over here.
Oh yes, look at this.
Yep, that's everybody's got their favorites. We've got Goldilocks and the Vixen and the Camo. They've got names.
Here you learn that whale scientists have to start by improvising their own tools.
We now have a pregnancy test thanks to him.
You invented the pregnancy test. That's very cool.
This is where these samples become numbers and become valuable data for us in terms of how healthy are animals, how much are they reproducing.
These are Antarctic samples, Antarctic humpback samples. You can take a little bit of skin from them. There's so much about them.
The value of having been able to work with Logan for this long is like we've got 12, 15 years of data from the same species in the same place that we can now say with, certainty these trends are occurring.
This is also where they analyze the whale cam video and telemetry data that comes from those suction cup tags.
Can you remember the first time you saw a whale cam of any kind? What was it like?
2009, we put a critter cam on a humpback whale in the Antarctic, and we turned the lights off when we got it back, and we just pushed play, and we're like, holy crap. And I remember it very clearly.
See, these are pioneers that's reaching into areas that's never been discovered before. But the thing about it is we got scientists all over the world that are doing similar tasks on millions of other different forms. And hopefully we will be able to make up for lost time, and hopefully we will be able to correct the damages that we have done, not only to ourselves, but to Mother Nature, to our atmosphere, to the water, etc., etc.
It's like, this just changed everything. You know, like now we're seeing what the whale sees. Now we know why the whale is doing these things.
And now, artificial intelligence is helping them spot patterns human eyes could never see.
For example, when we look at those tags, we can analyze the data in a way that tells us, like, generally, is the whale feeding? Is it traveling? Is it sleeping? These very broad behavioral states. But what we can do with AI is give those data to a programmer, have a computer go through those and find more repeated patterns and show us, hey, this thing found 16 different types of behavioral states, whereas we thought there were 3 or 4.
Other scientists around the world are trying to use AI to interpret the bloops we heard with Natalia.
Flashdown.
The Templeton Foundation funded this project in Alaska, where a team from the University of California, Davis and the Whale SETI Institute had a 20-minute conversation with a humpback. First, the science team played a whale call recorded in the same spot the day before.
The first is a call called the thrup call. Thrup, it's a real basic signal that the humpback used.
Then a female humpback known as Twain responded 36 times, matching the intervals and even waiting for responses from the boat. Twain's thrups appear to be local messages. But humpback song can travel hundreds of miles, adding the dimensions of time and space to their language. Meanwhile, Chris Johnson was part of a team that studied sperm whales, the big-toothed Moby Dick species that hunts giant squid instead of krill.
Krill.
And they discovered that these guys communicate in regional dialects. Can we think about it like Americans have different accents and dialects?
Absolutely.
Sperm whales have the same.
You're all part of the same country, but you may find southern accents around this broad area from Texas to North Carolina.
Sounds to me like sonar, like a bat. In other words, they send out a signal and see how long it takes for it to come back. And that's basically their eyes. Could be. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Carolina, and this more kind of general accent maybe in Massachusetts and California. It is similar to that, but what we're finding, say, in the Pacific and work we're doing in the Indian Ocean, some are really local, but some span the entire ocean. And so we don't know what that means. We don't even know what we're going to do with conservation, but it's incredibly exciting, these discoveries that we continually make.
If you could interview one of your subjects, what would you want to know? What would you want to ask a whale if you could?
I'd probably ask, are you okay? I mean, first question, how you doing? You all right?
How you doing?
I'd say, oh yeah, I'd say sorry, right? If I could say one thing to a whale, I'd say sorry. And I work with a couple of these projects that are trying to use AI to understand the context and the meaning to animal communication. And I think I draw a line somewhere before then of, I don't have a need to talk to a whale. I don't have a desire to do it. Personally, I don't know that it's appropriate. I think there are some limits to how and what we should engage with animals.
Absolutely. I agree absolutely in what he's saying in the respect towards respecting them. But to answer the guy's question, I think if I was going to ask that to particular species, if I could talk to it, one of the first questions that I would ask, how old is your species? How old is your species? And wouldn't it be remarkable if they knew right down to the day, the month, the year, and the century, and how old it truly was? You ever thought about that?
A whale shouldn't have to tell us, these are the things you're doing to screw us, right? So I think
we shouldn't need a list of words.
Exactly. We know what the problem is. I don't need a whale to tell me what the problems are.
Right.
Oh my God! Thanks to social media, we have an ever-growing video library of our biggest planetary neighbors.
So cool. Did you get that?
Now, that event that they just recorded, That just happened within the past few years up around Maine, I believe.
I got it on video.
Type in hashtag whale. One can scroll through the organic joy that comes in seeing them thrive. And the grim sadness that follows every time a carcass washes ashore. Two emotions, easy to exploit for political points.
Windmills are causing whales to die in numbers never seen before. Nobody does anything about that.
When we come back, a quest to understand what's really killing these whales.
Multitude of things. More so than anything, humanity is. That's my opinion about it.
After whale...
Back up. Right there.
A century after whale hunters roam the seas, Japan, Norway, and Iceland are the only whaling nations left. And these days, their most common target is the friendly little minke.
That's a
Say they were hunted last because they're the small little guys.
Yeah, they live in a habitat where, it's hard to get to, and the smaller whale is not worth nearly as much. But what they lack in commercial value, they are incredibly emblematic of the sea ice ecosystem and the things that are changing here.
After a global whaling ban, diplomatic outrage, international lawsuits, and the harassment of activists like Sea Shepherd, Japan stopped hunting big whales about a decade ago and lowered their quota from 1,000 to 333 minkies a year. In the so-called whale wars, Sea Shepherd briefly surrendered in 2017, saying they could no longer compete with Japan's upgraded fleet and military-grade technology. But last year, Sea Shepherd also upgraded with a new ship and is headed back to Antarctica on a new mission. Meanwhile, up in Iceland, where whale watching has its own economy and taste for pickled blubber are changing, the tiny nation of Vikings is down to their last whaler. A man we visited in 2015, just as he was bringing in his day's catch. And fair warning, you may find some of these images difficult to watch.
And that's the harpoon, that's the gun at the front. This is the gun where you have to load the harpoon with the harpoon and then you screw the grenade on the front. That explodes inside. There's nothing in the gun now, you see.
Christian Lawson is the heir to a family business that over the years has killed over 15,000 fin whales.
Wow. There's two of them.
2 fin whales, yes.
Back then, Iceland decided they had enough of this animal in their waters to kill around 150 a year. And in 2023, his 2 boats harpooned 2 dozen. But as one of the richest men in Iceland, he is not in this for the money. A disturbing amount of this whale would be shipped to Japan and sold as pet food. And he relishes the comparisons to Captain Ahab, the monomaniacal whale in Moby Dick.
What do you say to people who are watching this in America and other countries and are just mortified because they believe that this is a special animal?
All animals are special. Whale is no different to moose or deer to me, You shoot them in the U.S.
Pride comes before the fall, man.
I mean, a lot of emotion on that. I see a dying industry when I see this.
That just must piss you off.
Yeah, I mean, the step that is challenging for me to take is to tell somebody else what to do and what not to do based on their culture. And are my beliefs more important than his or better than his? I don't want to see any whales killed. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's unnecessary. Even if the only reason you're doing it is because your parents did it, your father did it, your grandfather did it, I'm not going to tell them it's wrong to think that, but I think it's wrong to do that, And it's sad, but like Chris said, it is a dying industry. I mean, when you can talk to a single person that is the industry. It's not like you had to, it's not like there's 20 ships going out there or 100 ships. It's a single person. At least you can identify that. But it's so unnecessary.
But while whales may be safer from harpoons these days, they now must compete with humans for their main source of food. Krill is sold around the world as an omega-3 supplement, as well as food for pets and fish farms. Last year, a fleet of industrial trawlers was recorded charging into a pod of feeding fin whales in the Southern Ocean. It is rare proof of a hugely controversial practice that, while legal, inspired Greenpeace activists to lash themselves to the anchor of a krill trawler in 2018.
You have 10 minutes. After that, I make my speed full ahead.
Slow down and give us a chance to remove our people.
They only relented after the captain warned he was about to take them into the high seas at full steam. But Sea Shepherd has now made krill trawlers their target and will spend this season tracking them across the Southern Ocean.
So this is Antarctic krill fishing on the Antarctic Peninsula, and we're seeing evidence of growing bycatch of the fishery of humpback whales, but we're also seeing the fishery setting on humpback whales as well, which is a major concern to us. And right now there aren't rules against that. So this evidence is crucial.
Is there a movement towards whale-safe fishing the way there was for dolphin-safe tuna? Is that a possibility?
It is. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of creative people coming together, and a lot of money. With North Atlantic right whales, 85% have been getting entangled in lobster gear. And right now we have a technology called on-demand fishing. Unfortunately, right whales are very curious and they get entangled in these end lines. What on-demand fishing does, it removes that line. So whales won't get entangled in it. And you have this technology where it releases a sac of air, it brings the pot to the surface, or a whole series of pots. And it's just triggered by an acoustic device by a fisherman. And that fisherman can see on an iPad the location of their gear on the bottom of the sea.
Since 2017, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says that 12 out of 122 recorded cases of whale deaths or serious injuries on the Atlantic coast were due to ship strikes. So Chris Johnson and his colleagues at the World Wildlife Fund also lobby for the protection of migration paths they call blue corridors. And he helped convince MSC, the world's biggest mover of shipping containers, to voluntarily alter their routes around migrating whales.
Research shows moving the shipping lane 15 nautical miles south, which is the biggest, most busy shipping lane between Asia and Europe, will reduce ship strikes by 80%.
And that's just 15
Sadly,
miles.
dead whales have been in the news on the east coast of the United States. And that gins up all kinds of arguments over the causes of those sorts of things. What's your takeaway from what's happening there?
It's hard to disentangle, for lack of a better word, when you have whales and when you have people together in our human activities, that whales don't end up dead. Increases in shipping traffic, we know, lead to more strikes. Increases in fishing effort lead to more entanglement. The fact that those animals are all in one small place might indicate that, those are animals that are feeding at that time of year. Maybe that's the only place that food exists. And if that happens to co-occur with right at the Chesapeake Bay where there's massive shipping lanes, or, up in an area where there's a lot of, net fishing or line fishing, it's really unreasonable to think those animals aren't going to engage or interact in that way.
After NOAA recommended a seasonal speed limit for certain ships and certain spots, former President Trump turned it into a campaign issue in South Carolina.
We were just discussing it with a lot of boat companies back there that create a lot of jobs and they're having a hard time. With a boat speed limit of less than 11 miles an hour, about 10 miles an hour. In other words, like a slow golf cart.
And then he shifted the blame to the development of offshore wind power, an industry still in its American infancy.
I saw it this weekend. 3 of them came up. You wouldn't see it once a year. Now they're coming up on a weekly basis. The windmills are driving them crazy. They're driving the whales, I think, a little batty,
Yeah, I don't think a windmill can kill a whale, to be honest. I think the relationship that we should examine is, as you're building these wind farms, the amount of ship traffic that's going out, to and from shore is likely to increase the amount of ship traffic, but in a very localized area. The disturbance from putting in the pilings probably affects animals in that area, but probably the animals will just leave that area. And then to me, once a wind farm is in, it's just a passive obstruction in the environment that's not going to impact a whale. So I don't quite see the logic, right now about how wind farm development is impacting animals.
And ultimately, it is the ice melted by fossil fuel pollution that could hurt all of these creatures most of all. Some faster than others. Those Gentoo penguins we spotted upon arrival, despite the overheating planet, it turns out they are thriving thanks to their willingness to adapt. While some penguin species refuse to move their nests and are dying out, Gentoos have been rolling with the changes and numbers have exploded.
We think of humpbacks as being the Gentoo penguins. We see them everywhere. They live in urban environments. They migrate all over the planet. They're in every ocean of the world. That's the most adaptable species of whale that we think is out there. If anything can overcome an issue, it's going to be a humpback whale. So when we see it in a species that we know is supremely adapted to take advantage of a lot of different situations, when that animal gets stressed, that's a concern. What's happening now is that you're getting more and more bad ice years consecutively and fewer good ice years. Krill has a limit, sea ice has a limit, and we've gone over that tipping point to where things are now limited in this population. You can't evolve or adapt quicker than nature is changing.
But there was one sign of human hope on our voyage as Chris got word of the passage of humanity's first global oceans treaty.
The breakthrough, which covers nearly 2/3 of the ocean, marks the culmination of nearly 2 decades of work.
Nearly 70 countries have signed it, and if at least 60 ratify it back home, it could set the framework to protect 30% of the oceans by 2030, including blue corridors.
The Global Oceans Treaty is so significant to us. The high seas are 60% of our oceans. This is, we've always referred to it as the tragedy of the commons. It's the area where it's lawless.
Nobody owns it, so nobody takes care of it.
That's right. Nobody owns it. Nobody takes care of this. So to have the framework to be able to implement law around protected areas, around the impacts that we have on our ocean, about the things that we do,
it's a breakthrough.
That's the first step for us to really have benefit and protect our oceans for a long time.
It's a breakthrough.
There it is.
I left this place wondering, can the relationship between man and whale evolve in time to save both species?
Nice shot!
Too soon to tell. But the next time you're near an ocean, spare a thought for the gentle giants. Somewhere out there farming the seas and singing their songs. Consider the countless human choices that led to the comeback of the humpback. And just how much they could still teach us about life on Earth.
I took notice of a significant difference in the Gulf water, the way that it felt compared to me working in Florida in 1979, over in the Tampa area, putting up a hospital, being adjusted to going out into the Gulf waters probably about once or twice a week, and then coming back about 20 years later, and how the water had warmed up, and plus it had a filmy substance in the water that it did not have in 1979. So I can tell a difference in the pollutions that humanity has done just within my lifetime. And it's been significant. Of course, some may say, well, that's stagnated water compared to the open seas, and it may be, but still, you're talking about dealing with the same substance that's connected all the water together. That if it's not yet affecting the open seas, eventually it will. Eventually it will. Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us. We want to thank this particular program in the whale stories, that hopefully somebody can learn something from it that will advance our knowledge and futuristic things that we can study and look at, identify, and maybe even correct. God bless. Shalom.